Well, welcome once again to HuskerChat, our spring version. Jayson Jorgensen with you. As always, we're joined by Sean Callahan of HuskerOnline. He's joined us in studio as we take a look back at spring practice for the Huskers. Also, we are live on Facebook today. So if there is something you'd like to ask Sean, if you've always wanted to ask him something as part of our chats here, you can do that. You just let us know on Facebook. Sean, thanks a lot for stopping by today.
Hey, it's great, Jason, to be here. We talked off air. I've been working with the KRVN for over 20 years, which I'm not that old. You're not that old, but somehow we've worked together 20 years. And it's great to get up here to meet the entire crew here at the radio stations. And I'm like, I was in McCook last night. I'm going to be in Kearney later today. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pit stop in Lexington today. And it's worked out great.
You make the rounds across the state. I know you always do during the spring. What's the general sense that you are getting from Husker Nation at this point?
I mean, people are fed up. I think people want to see results. I mean, it's been 5 losing years in a row, which is the most Nebraska's ever had in the modern day history of the program. And the support is still there. That's probably the most amazing thing is when you go to the Iowa game, when Nebraska's 3-8 playing Iowa and they finished 3-9 after that game, that stadium was still full and the ticket market was still a very hard ticket to get your hands on. And I think that's what, when you look at Nebraska, that's what blows people away still, that there's nowhere else, not just in college football, but the world, where 5 straight years of losing seasons and the support would still be there. And that's why this needs to happen. I mean, Nebraska needs to get this turn. Too many people want this to succeed for it not to happen. And they finally, I think, catch a break with the schedule in some respects this year, where you go back to last year and, you look at computer metrics. Nebraska was the number 36 ranked team in the country in computer polls. And, the unfortunate thing is their 8 of their 9 losses came to teams ranked 27 or better. And they played 4 top 10 teams. So they were an improved team last year, maybe the best team Scott Frost has had, but they played arguably the toughest schedule that Nebraska's ever played before. And they could not win those close games, as we know. And that was why Nebraska was 3-9.
To me, this is one of the biggest springs off season for Scott Frost. He obviously is fighting for his job. They made some changes. What's your biggest takeaway from this spring, and how good was it for this program, and did they get everything accomplished?
Yeah, 15 practices with spring break in there. They went 6 weeks. So they had a lot of time. Spring ball is technically longer than fall camp in a lot of respects with the time you get with the players. But with the new coaching staff, I think the biggest thing they did was they've changed the offense, but they've kept the language the same. So the verbiage for the players did not change. And that's the biggest thing, when you switch verbiages, it's like learning a new foreign language. And I think they did a good job to keep that the same. But Mark Whipple's running the show. I mean, this is his offense in a lot of respects. You'll see Nebraska under center more, under Scott Frost running the show. They had never been under center. So it's going to have more pro-style elements. I think the offensive line is going to play more of an attack style versus the catch and release style they had played before. And that's what Scott Frost wanted. He wanted this line to fire off the ball more, play with a more attack style versus the catch and release style that Greg Austin used for his system up front. So there's going to be a lot of differences. I think they've added a lot of key players, though, not only at quarterback with Casey Thompson. I think Chuba Purdy's a great addition, but Anthony Grant at running back, Trey Palmer at receiver. We didn't get to see Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, but I do think he's going to be a guy that will play a lot at receiver as well this year.
Today we're talking with Sean Callahan, a spring version of HuskerChat. We're also live on Facebook. If there's something you'd like to ask Sean, you can go ahead and do that, and we will read your question on the air. Sean, now, did you get to watch any spring practice? Was any media allowed in spring practice, or did they keep this pretty secret?
So in my time doing this is the first time the media wasn't even allowed to watch 20 minutes. And I don't know what the thought was, because honestly, when we're in there, it's just warm-ups and pre-practice install. But they didn't allow them in this year. So that was unique. And I'll be curious how it is in August. I'll be curious how it is even in Dublin, Ireland. I mean, there's going to be a group of us that's going over to Dublin. And, it's like a bowl game, and usually you get to go watch a little bit of practice of the bowl game, take some photos. Will they even have it shut down to the extent for the 8 of us that go to Dublin? I don't know. But yeah, they kept it. Now, they still let people in. I mean, there was the first scrimmage they had, all the former players were invited to go. So you had a lot of opinions and thoughts come out of that first practice. And then the second scrimmage they ran, the coaches clinic went on. So you had hundreds of eyeballs at both scrimmages. It wasn't like they shut it down completely, but for whatever reason, they don't want the media to see things. But I talked to a lot of players. I talked to a lot of coaches that have watched these practices. Casey Thompson definitely got better from scrimmage 1 to scrimmage 2. I think Anthony Grant, everyone you talked to and you saw it again Saturday in the spring game, he looks like a guy. Trey Palmer is the best receiver they have right now. I think he's going to be their number one guy. And, I think he could push to be 1,000-yard receiver. It really wouldn't surprise me at all if he put up those kinds of numbers the way they're going to use him.
We're talking with Sean Callahan as we do have a question today from Derek. He says, I hope the polar bear can make a jump and be a force up front on the defensive line. Now, what's your take on the polar bear?
Yeah, that's Nash Hutmacher, Chamberlain, South Dakota kid. I think he's really in a position where he's going to be giving Nebraska maybe 15, 20 snaps a game. He's not a guy that can play 50 or 40 snaps. I look at the D-line today and like Ty Robinson, Casey Rogers, those are guys that can take on that load, but they really want to get more people on the D-line in the transfer portal. Ochon Mathis is going to be an edge guy, but they would like a bigger body guy still. But I do think Nash will factor in.
How about that defense? There's been so much made about the offense, but defensively, they weren't bad last year. They were improved, but boy, Coach Shanahan's got some big pieces he has to replace.
Yeah, and you think about Kyron Williams, JoJo Doman, Markel DeSmuke, Ben Stilley, those were all 6-year seniors. And technically Will Honus was too, and he didn't get a play because he got hurt again. And you just don't have defenses with that many old players on it that have been around the block. And I'll say this, I think those guys, some of them were maybe limited athletically. Like Markel DeSmuke ran a 4.75 40, and his vertical was like 31 or 32 as a safety in the Big Ten. So he wasn't the most blessed athlete, but he had like a really good knowledge of the scheme. They've got better athletes now, in my opinion, but can they get them up to play the scheme? And that's where the coaches have to really earn their money, because I do think they've upgraded in terms of athletic ability on the back end and length and talent, but can you get them to play? And a lot of guys necessarily don't know how to play a scheme, because in high school they don't have to. They can just sit back there and be a safety and kind of roam and do what they want to do. In college, it's a lot different. I think Noah Paul Gates is a great example of that. They could just set him back and be a freelancing roving safety, do what you want and get the ball carrier. And in college, you can't do that. You've got to play a scheme. And that will be the interesting thing. I do think Tommy Hill has been a great addition at corner out of Arizona State. I think coaches have told me he's maybe their most talented guy right now, and I think he'll push to start. I think Marquise Buford's going to emerge as a second-year player in the program this year, and it will be interesting. Obviously, Quentin Newsom, Braxton Clark, Miles Farmer, those three, Isaac Gifford. But where does Pula Gates fit? Where does Deshaun Singleton fit? You've got some other guys in there that they brought in. Omar Brown has not yet practiced, but he's a good one. So they've got options on the back end. It's a matter of figuring out how they want to use them.
About the third facet of football, and this has been a sore thumb under Scott Frost the last couple of years, special teams. He finally went out. Bill Bush is calling the shots now with special teams. It's got to be better, and it certainly needs to be. What's your take on the improvement they made there?
Well, yeah, they hired a full-time coordinator. First time they've done that at Nebraska since Bruce Reed was here, where Nebraska's had a dedicated special teams coordinator and Bill Bush. And so Bill has done that before at Nebraska with Bill Callahan. He was a very successful special teams coordinator when he was here. They've immediately upgraded the punter. Brian Buschini was the FCS punter of the year at Montana. They got Timmy Bleekrod from Furman, and he's not here yet. He graduates in Furman in May. And really, when I break down Timmy, I think the biggest thing is they just want a guy that can make a 10-foot putt. They're not worried about a 55-yard field goal, but when you get inside the 25-yard line and you're 4th and 8, you better be able to make that 42-yard field goal or that 38-yard field goal. And Nebraska has not been able to do that. And I think Timmy should, ideally with his numbers he's put up at Furman, should be able to make those kicks. And, that's why they evaluated him and gave him a scholarship. And you talk about how big those points are. Every single game Nebraska plays, the point spread is 3 to 7 points, one way or the other. That missed kick, that shank punt, that's the difference. And they have to button up that area of the game. Then in the return game, Tommy Hill can return, but I think Trey Palmer, he has returned a kick and a punt for a touchdown already in SEC football games. So they've got a guy in Trey Palmer that, and he's a 10, by the way, he's a 10-3 electronic in the 100. So he's got elite speed. So they've upgraded, no doubt. And I think it's Bill Bush's job now to put it all together.
We have another question coming from Twitter, and I don't know how much you want to get involved in this, but we'll ask it because it's sent in. I want to know what's the win total? For Scott Frost this fall.
I mean, I think you got to hedge safe and say they should get 6 or 7, but I think the potential's there to win a couple more. But I look at the schedule, the first 9 games, other than Oklahoma, you play teams that you have as good or better talent than, in all of them. And, that includes Minnesota and that includes Purdue. Those are good teams, though. They've played really well. Rutgers, Illinois. But Nebraska's got to prove they can win those games. I think the key to the whole season is Northwestern. If they can beat Northwestern and they can get to 3-0, then you have North Dakota and Georgia Southern after the Dublin trip. Then you get Oklahoma coming to Lincoln and you could be 3-0. And I just think about like how spectacular that atmosphere could be if Nebraska's 3-0. And if Fox doesn't take that game at big noon kickoff and ABC's like, we're going to put it on at night. Can you imagine that game? And can you imagine if they beat Oklahoma? I mean, it's so close. You just think about it, how close. You think about the Michigan game, how close it was. Like that Michigan game was one of the best nights I've seen in Memorial Stadium in a long time. They lost. They had the ball tied in the last few minutes of the game to win against the team that played for the college football playoffs. So it's right there. And I think you got to start baseline goal, get to a bowl game first. From there, let's worry about the rest after that. But you got to get to 3-0. And I think if you can get to 3-0, the rest of the season will take care of itself. And the back end is Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Your toughest 3 games in the conference are the last 3 games. I do think Purdue will be a tough game, though. I think the Boilermakers return their quarterback, and Jeff Brom has got it kind of going on this year. So they're a dark horse, I think, to win the West when you look at Purdue.
I want to ask you one more question before we let you go. A lot of changes with the coaching staff. I love what I hear out of Mickey Joseph. He just seems to make a lot of sense. I would think he'd be a guy that kids would really want to play for.
Yeah, Mickey's been great. I don't know if anybody realized he'd be this good when he got here. I mean, I think you knew he's like, all right, he's a former Husker. He coached receivers at LSU. And I got a lot of respect for how Mickey climbed the coaching ladder. It wasn't like he was just handed a job. I mean, he worked high school jobs and small college jobs before he got to LSU. And so he's got a real appreciation for the grind to get to where he's at. And he's a great recruiter. His wife, Priscilla, she's hosting a talk show in Lincoln now. And she's involved in the program and talks to the players. So he's been a great addition and the players respect him, and he can talk to the players differently. He just has the ability to say it as it is and get away with it. And the players respect him because he's like, look, I coached Jamar Chase. I was around Joe Burrow. I was around this guy. I'm going to tell you what I think. And the players, I think, respect that with Mickey Joseph.
Another quick question. Speaking of recruiting, how do you feel that went with all of the recruits they had in on Saturday?
They had over 25, 30 guys that had scholarship offers. And I know if you don't follow recruiting closely, like what does that mean? Well, a normal weekend, like an official weekend, 10 is like an enormous weekend. So they had the equivalency of 3 of their biggest recruiting weekends all at one time. And that says something. And I think when you have 54,000 fans to watch a 2-hand touch football game, that says something about Nebraska fans too. Because I know people are like, oh, they didn't get 70 this year, 80,000. I still think 54,000 could lead the country. I just think people in general don't want to go to spring games anymore. And if you watch the game on TV, you can see why. It wasn't really that exciting, but it was huge. And I think it was the first time Nebraska had visitors at a spring game since 2019. Wow. And that has, since 04, has been the event that kind of like gets the dominoes going, because you get them in the pond and you show them everything, and then you get them back again. Hopefully you get them to come again. And ideally, the history tells you if a guy comes the second trip, you got a really good chance. And the spring game is the ultimate kind of icebreaker to get a kid's attention about Nebraska, because a lot of these kids from the South, they're like, oh, Nebraska, it's just cornfields. And because I thought I'd see cows outside the football field and tractors, and they get here and they're like, man, this is not a bad place. So I do think that spring game, was big for recruiting and kind of laying the foundation for the next couple of years.
All right. Sounds good. Well, hopefully they have a great off season. We appreciate you stopping by. And of course, we're looking forward to doing this again in the fall.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I got to come in, and it was fun to get to do this in person. And thank you for everything that we've done together over the last several years, Jayson.
All right. Once again, that was Sean Callahan of HuskerOnline joining us for a spring version of Husker Chat. I'm Jayson Jorgensen. Thanks for joining us today.